Hi, I am Becky Meagher, Transitions, Body, Mind, Spirit. We have all gone through so many transitions in our life, and I like to give the metaphor of triathlons, something that I've been doing for 13 years, I guess. And in a triathlon, the first thing you do is you swim, and then you get in the transition area, and then you get in your bicycle, and then you get in the transition area, and then you run. And that's just a great metaphor for what we do in our lives. So we have so many different aspects, and we have an incredibly fascinating person today. This is show number 2, so make sure you see show number 1, which is more biographical. And today we are doing a show on Dr. Brent Davis, who is a chiropractor, who is a creator of medicines from plants that are available, and just fascinating. He's been all over the world doing, finding out more about plants from the jungles of Peru to you name it. So rather than me talking, Brent, thank you very much for being here.
It's great to be here, Becky.
It's delightful to know about you and what you do. And tell us about a little background shortly, and then we really want to concentrate on the products that you are making from the farm that you own outside of Nashville, Tennessee.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Well, this little book, which you've been reading.
This is a wonderful book here. And
The Floral Hand of God, Secret Healing Codes of Flowers Revealed. That talks about what happened in my early life and the fact that, I just loved nature as a kid. I spent a lot of time there, and there's one passage in there that talks about, hearing the whispering of nature, instructing you in the future paths in your life. And that seems to have been what happened with medicinal plants. I'm going to need to cut here and clear my voice. So when I grew up in the Santa Monica Mountains of Los Angeles, I spent a lot of time in those beautiful areas near Will Rogers State Park, just a gorgeous part of that city. And I've just always been fortunate to be in nature when I couldn't live in that area that became an extremely prestigious area now in Los Angeles. I said, I got to get some more land, and so I moved from Los Angeles to rural Tennessee.
Rural Tennessee.
And got a 160-acre forest there with an open area that is got land for cultivating herbs, and started doing that in 1993.
Wow.
So, we spoke about that a little bit more previously in our first episode, that the way to develop herbal medicines is to be broadly familiar with appropriate technology, simple living, and common sense approaches to wellness. And we've lost common sense. In our healthcare system. It's insane for me to hear serious people in a congressional dialogue. How can we possibly control medical costs? Pretty simple, folks. Get a little common sense. Just simply don't do what we're doing. I mean, it's just an error. I'm seeing beautiful advertising for people to get all excited about a hospital for their children. Who in the world needs a hospital? $100 or $200 million hospital for children.
Right.
Children shouldn't be sick. If we did anything normal and reasonable, our children wouldn't be sick.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about because you do have a farm and you can grow various plants that can be healing. Tell us about what you are working on, and you have kind of like 2 parts, the floral part and then the hemp part. So tell everybody what this is.
Yeah, the book covers a period of my life between the turn of the millennium, around 2000, where I had this sort of vision of how to extract a flower and get the vibrational frequencies out of that flower for healing without cutting the flower. And that's an extremely important, it was given to me in a vision. I had one night, I just saw how to do it. Spent a couple of weeks figuring out how to do that technology, which is an appropriate technology. It doesn't use anything in our modern era. It's ancient technology of how to do that so that you arrive at a substance which has a very powerful vibrational frequency that's completely coherent. So the word coherence is very important in quantum physics because it means that a waveform is stable. And when you take a coherent space and you reduce chaos in that space, you organize matter in that space better. So when you make your body more coherent, physiology works better.
Okay.
When you make your brain more coherent, you have less noise in your brain functions better. So
Okay.
it's a very basic concept. If you cut something, you distort the life energy. You introduce a frequency into it that disrupts the biological integrity of that uninterrupted waveform, okay, is the life cycle waveform.
So you mentioned in your book that you have gone to different places and there'll be a particular flower, and then the thing I didn't understand when I read it is that you're like one with the flower, and somehow how do you extract healing energies from a flower? How do you do it? Is that something that you can tell us?
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit of it. There's a patent. You can look at the patent, but it's gone way beyond the patent, so now it's just trade secrets, which I don't discuss beyond a point. But when you take a flower, the traditional method is you take a little crystal bowl, you fill it with water, you cut the flower and stick it in there. Mm-hmm. And there's enough life force left in that flower to make a definite healing preparation. That's the basis of some of the largest company, that Dr. Bach's original insight. Those products are still for sale today. So it does have an effect, but you can produce vastly more powerful effects from flowers when they're extracted without cutting them. And again, I spent an entire central section of that book with science advisors. Dr. William Tiller is now Professor Emeritus of Physics at Stanford, but he taught there for many years. He's a brilliant physicist, but he helped be a sounding board for me to ask him if my theories had a basis in fact, and they do.
Okay, so are you going to tell us how you get the healing vibrations from a flower? How do you do that?
You make sure that the water is covered. You make sure that the flower is covered with water while it's still living.
All right.
And can't say any more than that. There's a very unusual way of doing that. But what people will do, there were people before me that understood the benefits of making a flower essence without cutting it, and they would they would drip water over the top of it, and so for a few millimeters of the flower, you would get that energy. And I've developed a process which collects all the energy from the flower.
Okay. So that energy is taken and put it in a bottle.
It's put first. It's collected into a bowl-like apparatus, and then if you similar to the concepts of homeopathy, the vibrational frequency of that substance is so incredibly intense that the way to get a more manageable healing force out of it is to dilute it tremendously, which makes no sense in thinking of normal. We think of concentrating something chemically to make it stronger, but from an energetic standpoint, and in homeopathy and in vibrational healing, frequently you have to increase the space between the molecules to make it more powerful. Okay. So when you highly dilute this stuff, but it's not homeopathic. Homeopathic is ground up, triturated. This is not.
Okay.
Homeopathy is serially diluted, which means factors of 10 or 100 or 1,000 diluting it. It's serial dilution. This is not diluted that way. But it is highly diluted in a particular form that I created, and it, given to me. An awful lot of what I do is just guidance. You wouldn't think of this stuff. You wouldn't sit around and think about it.
So the energy from the flower you extract, and it's patented, and we don't know exactly how you do it, but it's something about immersing it, and then. If you're like weren't you in Peru, and you're in the middle of the jungle?
I carry the equipment on the biggest, one of the most important trips I went on was in 2015. We had a whole group of people.
And that was where?
In Peru.
In Peru.
Two different areas in the high Andes. I wished I could have gone with a film crew because it was a pretty extraordinary experience. We had pack animals, mountaineering guides. We had a full-fledged. We had a mess tent. We had a whole community of people helping to make that extraordinary trip possible. And I went there under guidance to find, interestingly enough, something to get rid of the core causes of depression. That's why I went on that trip. And it occurred
depression.
To me. It occurred to me when I heard, how many people over the years, how many people in the United States are on antidepressants. I thought a great deal about it, and I see a lot of patients for mind-body problems. So I always inquire as to their mental status, mental emotional status. And an awful lot of people have many things that cause them to feel hopeless, and depressed. And I really realized after thinking about it that my opinion, the core cause of depression is hopelessness. When you become hopeless, what's the point of maintaining yourself in a healthy place? You might as well die early, kill yourself, gamble, drink, use drugs, because there's no point. So it really hit me powerfully that was something that needed to be done, and it was a successful trip. And those products many of those flowers ended up going into something that I called Smile. And so the wonderful flower frequencies in there can elevate the mind-body spirit connection so that hopelessness is gone. So it's certainly not an antidepressant. They're not drugs. They don't even come out of that paradigm. They're in a psychospiritual paradigm where you get to the core cause of hopelessness, and it can be elevated. Now, what's really interesting is how were the floral life flowers developed, and that's an interesting story. Maybe we can go into that.
Okay.
It wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to go around the world and start collecting flowers. Why would you do that? There'd have to be a reason to do that. And the reason is stemming from the early use of flower essences in the earlier part of the 20th century. They will change somebody's tendencies toward thinking in an unproductive way. This was proven ever since the 1930s when Dr. Bach did his development work, and then all for the 50 years after that, it became very clear that you could use flower essences to alter patterns of people's behavior so that they changed the way that they did things, and they became more balanced. Now, the question still is, how do you determine what flower does what? How do you know that? Well, most people still don't. They use questionnaires, they use inventories, but there's a way to very specifically find what a flower will do. And I happened to be in the right place at the right time in the mid-1980s, where, unbeknownst to most people, the field of energy psychology was developed by none other than chiropractors, not psychologists. A chiropractor by the name of George Goodhart, surrounded by a very interesting group of holistic physicians and health professionals, some of whom were psychologists and a psychiatrist or two, all together found out something very, very interesting, that when you do what the marvelous books of Louise Hay,
oh yes,
remember that, 1984, you can heal your body, you can heal your body, you can heal your, the first one I don't remember, the second book was You Can Heal Your Body. That became an enormous, the woman does extraordinary. It's a publishing empire.
Yes, Hay House.
Hay House has produced so many extraordinary books, and what was striking and is unknown to most people is that the way that energy psychology was developed was by one doctor in that meeting that I happened to be attending, reporting an interesting case study. He had a patient that was saying a positive affirmation many times a day. Well, let's just say, I'm healthy, wealthy, and wise, whatever.
Right, healthy, wealthy, and wise.
I'm healthy, wealthy, and wise, or healthy, wealthy, and happy, whatever you want to say. Well, the doctor found that by doing muscle testing, you can assess what's going on in the unconscious mind. This is what's extraordinary. If a muscle is a test muscle, and you have to be doing this correctly, but if you're trained to do it properly and you test a muscle, it is a neuromuscular indicator of what's going on in the body, either neurologically if it weakens, or at the thought level. So if you say something that is not true or not coherent within yourself, a previously strong muscle will weaken. It's like a lie detector test. Now, if somebody's not trained, it can look like a party trick or parlor trick. If they are trained, it's a physical diagnostic technique, and it's very, very valuable. So the doctors in that meeting were intrigued by this idea, and there was born the idea of assessing people to find out what they believed unconsciously. If you can find out destructive beliefs that someone has unconsciously and can figure out a way to change those beliefs, you'll change the person's life profoundly.
So are you saying the flower essence changes your belief and therefore
does
changes your behavior?
Yes. It does it by a powerful stimulus to the higher dimensions, which then come down into the physical brain. Memory is not stored in the physical brain. It's stored in higher dimensional realities.
The cloud?
The cloud. Our memory is stored in the cloud, and our brain acts as a very important transceiver. So all of this is covered in this book, but it's covered in a way that I just have not seen another book talk about the quantum physics of how we think and how you can alter thought by altering the other dimensions which are at a higher frequency rate. And we actually I went to a scientist in Switzerland to analyze with very, very sophisticated antenna arrays and very sophisticated electronics. You can actually measure the frequency emissions out of this, and you can measure the body when a highly coherent state is produced in the body. You can look at you can measure a person, which is in the book, the graphic part later in the book, one of the appendices, and you can see a very rough, non-coherent pattern which represents a high level of stress. You can administer the substance orally. What's even more amazing, you can just hold the substance. And the waveform that is being electronically measured by very sophisticated technology changes and becomes more coherent. That is just exactly paralleled by the thinking process becoming more coherent. Now, so let me give you an example. So I'm off in Peru and into an area that I tried to get to about 3 times, and it was like there was some hidden wall. I just couldn't get there. And I knew it was very important. It's an area I don't talk about. It should remain anonymous because there are mysteries in this place that should never be interrupted, or it can never become a tourist center, let's put it that way. It would destroy the energetics. It's very hard to get there, but when you once get there, it's kind of like Hilton's book, The Lost Shangri-La. Remember that in the 30s? I guess that book came out. They made a movie about it where they went off into far Tibet and they found this amazing place. This place is kind of like that. So when you get there, it's pretty amazing, and I was able to find a shaman that could see what I was up to, and he agreed to help me out. The first place he took me was to a sacred lake very high in the Andes, and to a little mound or little rock formation at the top of this lake. And we walked up there, and he didn't say very much during the whole days I was with him. Very little he didn't say. He would just show me things, and he pointed to this flower which was growing right on the ground. It looked like it had fallen on the ground, but it was actually growing on the ground. And he said, this flower is called Flor de la Luna, flower of the moon. And it's very important. Well, I was kind of wondering why it's important. He just didn't say. He just said it's very important. So I made an extract. That was one of the first things that I extracted in Peru. And I took it back to my office. And as typically happens, it's like I can't organize these things. It's like whoever our creator, whoever runs this operation down here, sends in the patients that I need. And every time, this has been going on since the early 2000s. So now I just plan on it. So when I have a new flower, I know that the person that needs it will come in the first week or 2 that I get back. That's exactly what happened. So somebody came in that was having a lot of relationship problems. And I realized, we talked a little bit, certainly not a therapist, but you have to, any doctor, I'm a general practitioner, you have to listen to what's going on with people and know how to treat them. It's essential.
So you listened, and
it's not happening in most offices today, but it's really, really important. It's been lost from general medicine. But when you listen to the person, so we found out what's going on with this relationship. We crafted a phrase for this person. It was a woman. We crafted a phrase for this lady to state. The statement was, I allow myself to receive love.
I allow myself to receive love.
She completely weakened when she made that statement.
Wow, I
It
allow
was
myself
not true.
to. Wow.
She was strong.
Right.
We tested her to make sure she was coherent with her. The way you do that is you test anything that we know is true,
right,
like my name is. Then you test something that you know is not true, a false name
and then
or
you
anything.
Can see.
And you can see if you're calibrating, if the muscle's working correctly. If you don't do
Mm-hmm.
that, you may be off on a wild goose chase. But if you see that it's not working correctly and you've calibrated the testing, you know that you're doing it properly. You can then explore by various phrases. It's fascinating, and this is the work of energy psychology.
That it truly is fascinating, and we have so many other things to cover too in our short time. You have CBD oil, right?
Well, yeah,
and
so
the whole
other thing. So the flower essences in 2015. That was my last big trip, and then shortly after that, I became aware of the amazing characteristics of hemp.
So hemp.
And
hemp has a bad name because it's marijuana.
It's marijuana in the 1930s. You know the hemp madness and all the crazy stuff that was going on, reefer madness, representing it as as this terrible evil substance. When in fact it was used earlier in the early part of until the 20s or 30s. It was in our United States Pharmacopoeia. It was a valued drug. It was clearly used in place of opiates and morphine and things like that. It was very valuable. And then, for many reasons, it's too long a story, but it's all over the internet. You can read about how that happened. You can see that there was a whole agenda to get rid of hemp.
So what made you go, I want to grow hemp in Tennessee?
Here's what made me grow it. I don't ever do anything without clinical validation. So the doctors that do the kind of work that I do it with nutritional testing. We do many different ways of doing it, but you can do a neuromuscular test, find a weakness, put a substance lingually in the mouth, and neurologically the body will measure very quickly what's going on, and it'll tell right away if it's suited for the body or not. There's increasing numbers of practitioners, tens of thousands of people in the United States doing that. And so if you do it correctly, it's quite remarkable. You can find out if something works, or what it does. You can find out from applied kinesiology, which has charted the way that muscles relate to organ systems and physiological function. If somebody has colon problems and is constipated, this muscle tends to be weak. If you test it, it'll be weak. If you give an herbal laxative that's appropriate for their needs, that muscle will get strong. And it does it instantly. I mean, it's a very interesting neurological, neuromuscular response. So for 30 years, it's been an invaluable guiding principle in my practice. So I was suited to evaluate hemp. So I found a grower in Kentucky that produced a very high quality hemp. I had him, and is a guy that's made a lot of money growing hemp and has a lot of money invested. He then produced a laboratory in the same facility that takes his hemp and makes a CO2 supercritical extract of that hemp.
The extract of the hemp?
Of that hemp, and he sells that extract.
Okay.
So being I am trained in science, I'm trained to get rid of what are called confounding variables. So I had a perfect way of testing, is a CO2 extract of hemp really valuable? Or could I come up with a way of making a product that didn't use pharmaceutical technology and supercritical CO2 extraction, which are very expensive extractors, by the way. They're very expensive technology if you get a good one. I thought, well, is there a way of doing this more naturally? So I got the herb from that company, the actual herb that was used in the same batch that they gave me, the concentrate of this paste that's then diluted.
Right.
And then I took that herb to my lab and I did an extraction in different ways. And I had those things there, like any nutritional product, that I could evaluate. And I found something very amazing when I saw you could extract the substance with olive oil as opposed to a very fancy, I mean, our process is really complicated, but it's not using pharmaceutical technology. It's using old world technologies to arrive at these things, which are olive oil, very high quality olive oil extracts. And what I found was a vast difference between those things. Now, we just experienced, I did it before we taped the show.
Right, I was the human guinea pig, and he put this product on the back of my neck and laid me down and tested muscles before I had the liquid and after, and
Okay, so I'm going to explain this because this sounds crazy.
And
it
we
is
have
crazy.
3 minutes. So
all right, well, we'll explain it because it's still to this day, I just did it today, it still astonishes me every time I see it in practice. Okay, you come in, somebody says, I have back pain. That's a chiropractic problem. I see it every day. I have back pain. We know from our study in applied kinesiology, there are many major muscles that support the pelvis. If those muscles are weak, it's going to contribute to the back pain. So here's what happened, and I didn't know. I mean, it was this thing like, well, try this. And I was so surprised when I found it. I evaluated this lady. Her piriformis muscle was very, very weak. That's a pelvic muscle down here. And something said, apply this roll-on to the base of the skull, to the brainstem area.
The brainstem.
The brainstem. And rub it in and go back and test this. Well, I did. The muscle became completely strong. That led me to months of research where I've published a 61-page white paper,
61 pages.
which is all that you might ever want to know about the academic references for hemp.
Well, because we are running out of time, basically people can get this product.
Yeah. It's heavenscenthemp.com.
Heavenscenthemp.com.
Yep.
And it is legal. Everybody says, is that legal in Tennessee?
Yes, it's legal. It's legal because it's part of the special 2014 hemp bill, which allows it to be used under experimental conditions when we're a registered facility. So you can do that. But the product, the companies that are making this, are selling it throughout the United States. And it will resolve. The 2000 Farm Bill was defeated today. 2018 Farm Bill was defeated with a real silly little thing. They'll work that out and they'll pass it. There are so many states where the farmers realize it is a massive industry. The United States would be totally idiotic not to do this. It will help our farmers, not to mention the fact that it's a great medicine, but it has all of these other things. And you don't want to call it a drug. It's a natural health substance.
A natural health thing, this oil derived from hemp.
Yeah, well, the CBD is one of many. There's phenolic compounds, flavonoids, there's terpenes, essential oils. People know how healing essential oils are.
Essential oils are on.
They're all in that plant. And so it is a complete pharmacy in itself, and it's here to stay. I mean, it's just what a wonderful thing.
So if people want to, they can actually see you as a patient in Nashville.
Oh, 3 days a week, yep.
3 days a week, you're in Berry Hill.
Yep, I'm in that practice.
And then also we're going to put your website up, and if people want to purchase CBD oil and the other products, they are available.
There is a distinction. We call this a phytocannabinoid-rich natural hemp extract, and we don't want to call it CBD because pharmaceutical companies and other people are going to start putting out isolated synthetic CBDs, and we don't want to confuse this. So it happens to contain CBD, but it's not a CBD oil.
Right. Well, we've learned a whole lot. Dr. Brent Davis has been wonderful. Thank you very much,
My
and
pleasure.
stay tuned. Transitions, Body, Mind, Spirit.